heard debates. I've heard names that should have been. I've heard possible GOATs. But this person, if we make a list, you have to. How do you establish a standard? Impact, culture, longevity. Just like the singers, right? Impact, culture, longevity. If there's one person in all of modern wrestling that has had the longevity, the impact, and the culture from a respect standpoint, it is Undertaker. Undertaker is the greatest wrestler of all time. And I don't care what anybody says. And you know what? He's not even my favorite. He's just the greatest, right? He's the first wrestler to grace a cover. I remember he's on a pinball machine and, walking a little tightrope. His identity has evolved probably more than any other wrestler. He was just the dead man that was burying people. Then he would come up and eyes roll back in the head. Then he was the keep rolling, 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 rolling. To me, that was the best version of Undertaker. The Limp Bizkit Undertaker was by far on another level because he was entertaining, right? Like you started to see more charismatic appeal. I mean, big boot. He was just with Taker was so cold that he didn't even have to show up. You could be in the middle of a promo and all you heard was dong. You hear that little tune, all right. They're like Taker. He would be that iconic that his sound. He had a sound, right? And I feel like if you don't have a sound, every great wrestler that I'm gonna list has a sound. If I can't recognize you by your sound, you weren't that great. That is why Undertaker is, other than all the WrestleManias and all those stuff, that's why he's my number one wrestler.
I am so proud that you said that. I'm so proud. Undertaker is my favorite. And by far, regardless if he wasn't my favorite, like you said, he's the greatest wrestler we have ever seen.
Yeah.
And you gave nice bullet points, but in the wrestling world, we go by character, ring work, and ring psychology. That's how we go by it.
Okay.
And one thing about Undertaker is, for one, the character. One thing about wrestling, you have to have a character. Without a character, it's not wrestling to me. That's the whole purpose of it goes back to the whole history of wrestling, back to the carnivals. It's good guy versus bad guy. It's heel versus face. It's about stories. And the one thing I respect about him most is once he got that role as Undertaker, he lived it. And he lived it to the final years of his retirement, which was like 2 years ago, which is the crazy part of it. So, like, just to break a couple things down about why he's the greatest is one, his stature. He's 6'8". That's humongous for a wrestler. Most wrestlers are probably in between 5'8" to 6'4".
Yeah.
And 6'4", 6'5" is where you starting to get tall. So, I know in it for all the people that been like he's almost 7 feet tall. Nah, he's 7 feet tall. They that's what wrestling do. They add a couple inches, they add a couple of weight, but he was legit in his heyday, 6'8", 320 pounds. And one thing about him, he didn't move like it. Early on in his career, he thought wrestling so much to the point where like it's almost crazy. Like if you listen to some of his documentaries, like he lived to the character so much that the way he enacted himself in the ring was so different. So he wanted to be stalkish, like because the whole premise behind the story of the character was old school Undertaker, but in a horror film type of character. So they wanted him to be almost like Michael Myers. That's where he also got the sit up from. So he wanted to be stalky, slow, moving methodical, but like Mike Flyers, pop up out of nowhere, quick flash, and that's where you see them flashes of athleticism, him walking off the rope, him ducking under the big clothesline, snake eyes, stuff like that. and stuff like that. And then, like you said, he understand it at that age, and he was. And one thing about wrestlers, just to break this down, most wrestlers started their prime years is mid 30s. So
Yep.
he didn't get that character till he was like what 29, 30.
Yep.
And so he moving through that, going through his thing, progressing, being one of the best things, living his character, one of the best promos. That's another thing you got to add on. Mic skills. He wasn't the typical 80s, 90s promo. Well, let me tell you something, brother. When you go out there, I'm going to see you down there, Mean Gene, and we're going to get it cracking in the Roman Coliseum. He didn't have that.
No,
So
he
he
didn't.
thought methodology is what's a good way to bring people in. I'm going to speak in a deep voice, but I'm going to speak slowly and calmly so they could be like, what is he saying?
You're right. Right.
He
Yeah, that's
thought
true.
that type of stuff. He thought that type of stuff. And then I can see what you're saying when he moved to the Lip Biscuit character because he it needed to happen. He
Right.
couldn't be that same character, and that's where you seen him actually be able to have the mic skills where he could go toe to toe with a Rock, where he go toe to toe with a Stone Cold, and you really saw his mic skills. And then after that, to me, after Lip Biscuit is the best Undertaker because that's where he could combine everything. And once when he said himself, he didn't figure out the business to 100% till he was about 2003, 2004 or 5. And that's when he was like 41, 42 years old.
I get it. Look, Undertaker's undisputedly the best, greatest wrestler of all time. I think to not give him that is to be a hater and not to really be a true fan of.
I wouldn't even call you a hater because it's a lot of people you could give that cage to. But if you just want to, like you said, what you
Yeah.
said was perfect. If you're talking about the pedal stool of pedal